put your little hand in mine. There ain't no hill or mountain we can't climb. Babe, I got you, babe. I got you, babe.
Okay, campers, rise and shine, and don't forget your booties, because it's cold out there today.
It's cold out there every day. What is this, Miami Beach?
Not hardly.
Episode 236 of 20 Minute Tims, and I am joined by Stephen.
What's happening?
And Melly.
Yes.
And lads, well, it's Groundhog Day again. For the first time in the history of this podcast, we've no Celtic wins to talk about for the second week in a row. 4 goals shipped to AC Milan saw us out of the Europa League. Our European campaign is in the bin there. A failure to win against St Johnstone has probably seen our league campaign in the bin, and this comes only 7 short days after our League Cup campaign is in the bin. Stephen, it's December. We're 13 points and 21 goals behind the team at the top of the league, regardless of who it is. It just so happens to be Rangers at the moment. We've won 2 games in our last 12. There's no indication that there's any turnaround on the way. The league is over, isn't it?
Yeah. I took a big deep breath there before saying that, but yeah, it is. The way things are currently going, the current trajectory, the direction that we are going in as a club, it's definitely over. What are we actually looking at now? We need to match Rangers' form for the rest of the season and beat them 3 times. Is that what we're dealing with here now? We need Snookles essentially, right?
Beat them 3 times.
So we need to match them and beat them 3 times. Fantasy stuff, the way Celtic are playing just now. Absolutely ludicrous.
It's total fantasy, isn't it, Melly? Because, take 2 of those objectives. So if you split those objectives in 2, we've got to win our games in hand and we have to beat Rangers 3 times. If it was only one of those stood in the way of us in winning the league, if we only had to beat Rangers 3 times, we would be sitting on this podcast going, don't know about that. The way that Celtic have been playing against Rangers recently, that's no guarantee. Winning the games in hand, the way we've been playing recently, that's no guarantee. Putting those together at the moment seems almost unsurmountable. And do you think the league's over?
If Neil Lennon stays in charge, yes, the league is definitely over, because this isn't going to turn. This is just going to continue. We'll maybe win the odd game, but we'll get bad results as soon as we come up against a decent team, as we've said previously. But I can't give up the league yet. So close. It's December. Was there 24 games to go? That is a lot, and I know Celtic have been bad this season, but I still think that's a good squad. So I feel if a decent manager came in, we could maybe turn this around and go on a decent run. We get to the new year, and it's only league games we need to worry about. I'm
shaking my head at you, mate.
I know, mate. I can see
you sound
it's
like
pure fantasy, but
it's pure fantasy.
We could have. Celtic fans are raging right now, and rightly so. We're all raging because, see, when it comes to May, and if Rangers are crowned champions, we are going to look back and say, we told you at this point you should change it. You ignored it. We demanded you change it at this point, and then weeks later we're still sitting here and you haven't changed it. Celtic fans are going to say, we told you this wasn't working and you chose to ignore us. Why? Everybody just wants to know why.
Well, that's it. There's a tipping point for when you need to get change when things are too far gone. And for weeks, Stephen, we can take this back as long as you want, right? But for weeks, definitely, the Celtic fans and the not just fans, but pundits that aren't friends with the current manager and Scottish football observers, so fans and writers and journalists, a lot of people have been saying it's not working. Then the fans started saying to the board, we need a change of manager. This is quickly spiralling out of control. The only way to change it is to keep the manager. The board went against that and against all footballing norms and says, we're keeping the man in charge. We back him. The tipping point for me, the point of no return, was that St Johnstone game. And we dropped points. And we dropped points in that St Johnstone game. So the time for change, as far as I'm concerned, has passed. If you suddenly think, if like Melly does, that the board are going to come to their senses and change it. I'm telling you right now, even if the board woke up tomorrow morning, even if Dermot Desmond wakes up tomorrow morning, whatever tax haven he lives in, and goes, right, actually today I feel like I'm going to focus on Celtic and they need to win that league. What do I need to do? Right? Well, they need a new manager. That process will take a month. that process will take 4 weeks. That process will definitely take after the Rangers game. And we're not beating Rangers as it stands. So that's why I think the league is completely gone.
It's edging towards arguably even already too late to change, because as Melly said, we've been calling for this for weeks. We've been saying for ages that we need to change. So we're now at the point where, we must have said 6 weeks ago now, that any manager coming in will fancy their chances of turning this around and, getting the best out of this squad, turning this ship around somehow. But we're 6 weeks on from that now, and they're even more up against it. What manager is going to come in and turn this round? You would need, take Brendan Rodgers, multiply his ego by about 1,000, and you would need the confidence of that guy to come in and fix this absolute disaster of a season. And I use that word deliberately. It has been an absolute disaster. We sat here a week ago and talked about how we're out of 3 competitions in November. We're now 0 wins on from that now. We've played 2 games and 0 wins. I feel like, not to derail us completely, but some listeners, a lot of listeners out there will know that we do a fortnightly podcast on our Patreon service called the Friday Phone In, and it's a bit of anything goes, ask us anything, a lot of questions coming in from the listeners. And prior to this season starting, a heavy theme on it was that it was kind of, what would you do for 10 in a row challenges? It was kind of, like, for example, like, would you give Jimmy Bell a daily sponge bath if it meant we could seal 10 in a row? I'm now thinking back to, did I turn one of those down accidentally? Did I flippantly say, no, I wouldn't do that? And now I'm being cursed. Now it's like some cheesy 90s film, and that has actually come true. Because that's the only explanation for how bad this season has been. It can only be black magic at this point.
You're actually quite right, because I was thinking today, right? No, you're not quite right. It's not black magic, and you're being humorous, right? But I was thinking to myself today, like, this is almost unbelievable what we're witnessing here. It's it's like the fall of Rome type stuff, and we're watching Celtic, who have been so dominant for so long, give up this league with an absolute whimper. And do you know what the worst of it was, Belly? The worst of it was, whilst everyone at the Celtic board and the Celtic management sat at the top table and quaffed wine and ate whatever they ate in Rome and enjoyed themselves and had a good old time, us, the peasants on the ground, were going, the enemies at the gate, the enemies at the gate, they're climbing over the walls. Like, we were telling them, this is coming. This disaster is coming, and that's what's so galling to me. You only need to go back to the beginning of the season when you start to look at some of Celtic's results. We were on this podcast, Riga, Sarajevo, terrible against Riga, terrible against Sarajevo, terrible against St Johnstone, terrible against Rangers, Aberdeen drawing. All these games we were saying this is not going well. And it was just, it's like the Celtic board haven't been watching the games. It's like they've been doing something else, because that's the only explanation I have for it.
It's hard to believe that the last victory I celebrated was Scotland. The last time Celtic won a game, Scotland hadn't qualified for a major tournament.
I'm choking for an international break, by the way. Choking for it.
I would love an international break today, so it's not till March. But remember the Rangers game, we said this was in the post. This was always coming for Celtic. We hadn't been playing well all season. Now, this might be a bad analogy, but we'll hear it out.
We've had a few tonight already.
We've had a few. That's definitely our thing.
This was in the post. We get beat by Rangers. We're now sitting, Peter Law's sitting outside Celtic Park. He's got his confirmation email. Your parcel is on the way. The postman has knocked the door. Parcel's arrived. Handed it over to him. He's opened it, and it's a big bag of jobbies, and we're stuck there with it. Instead of sending it back, instead of emailing and saying, look, this isn't what I ordered, he's just sitting there with it, holding on to it as if somebody's going to come back and take it off him. He's backing it. He's like, put it up on the mantelpiece, maybe it'll get better. It's not going to get better.
Yeah. Extraordinary.
But the whole time this is happening and this is on the mantelpiece, everybody's coming in and saying, well, that's not right, that shouldn't be there, you should maybe throw that out. And he's like, nah, don't, you're being stupid, it's fine. Like, we're sitting here watching this every week, and the board are getting away with it because we're not in the stadium. They're putting up fences to stop us going up to the ground. and there's an AGM in a couple of weeks, and they're just lucky that nobody can go to that. It's unbelievable what we're watching here, the way we're being treated.
What we need here is a moment of clarity, don't we? We need someone to go, Peter, there's a shit on the mantelpiece.
That jobby beat Barcelona.
Aye, that would be his retort, wouldn't it? That would absolutely be his retort. Like, all joking aside, and you know what? At this stage, maybe all you can do is laugh. It's so frustrating for me as a fan because this has, as you said, Melly, this has been coming, and we as lowly podcasters, and not just us, every Celtic fan that's been watching Celtic this season, all the way back to Ferencváros and Riga and even Sarajevo and all the games we've mentioned, Celtic at no point have hit their stride. The first game of the season we were good, but apart from that, it's been very, very patchy. And we said on this podcast ages ago now, it seems that, I said on the podcast rather that I was getting Ronnie Dyler vibes. And this is almost like Neil Lennon would love to have Ronnie Dyler's record. At this moment, Neil Lennon would trade what he's doing this season for what Ronnie Dyler was doing when Ronnie Dyler gets sacked. Melly.
The whole time we've been doing this podcast, we've had a few rival, maybe not rival managers, but other managers in the league that we've had wee jokes about or thought got a harsh deal. Now, I had a wee look into their records, so I've got 5 names here for you.
Okay, the jobbers. So this is what you've done is you've looked into the record, just for clarity, of every manager that we've relentlessly taken the piss out of for being shite on this podcast. You've looked at his record.
Well, not all of them, because
I'm going to get sick. I'm going to get comfortable for this.
There's one in there that we respected and thought got a harsh deal. Okay. But the other 4. So I've got 5 names here for you.
And so what are the names? Tell us the names up top.
Ian Cathro, King VL.
Yes.
We have Craig Levine, the Specky Mourinho. We have Angelo Alessio.
I could barely remember who Angelo Alessio is. To be honest, the Kilmarnock guy that lasted about eight games or whatever. Yeah, okay.
22 games he lasted.
Okay.
We have Mark Warbiola and we have Pedro Caixinha.
Okay.
Now, out of those 5, 2 of them have a better record than Neil Lennon currently for this season. When they were sacked. Warbiola, Mark Warburton, he resigned. All right, so we can maybe give him that. At least he did dignity walk away. But there's Pedro, Warburton, Alessio, Levine and Cathro. Which 3 do you think had a worse record than Neil Lennon right now? Win percentage?
Alessio?
Sure. Correct. He had a 36% ratio, 8 out of 22. Cathro, he had a 23% win ratio.
Jesus, was that what Cathro hadn't he? What did he get the bullet? Wow. So who's like Craig Levine? Did he have a worse record?
Yeah, well, I just done Craig Levine for the season, but he won one out of 11 league games the season he was sacked. So we have Mark Warburton and Pedro Caixinha currently have better win ratios than Neil Lennon this season.
Jesus. So, you know what? Take Mark Warburton aside, right? Because he's went on to have some sort of career. He's manager of QPR just now in the Championship, so he's obviously got some sort of decent career. But what we're saying now is Neil Lennon, Stephen, is worse than Pedro Caixinha was for Rangers.
There's your headline. There's your clickbait headline. Goodness me. No, that's pretty stark. I mean, we're having a joke here because, as you said, Jimmy, the alternative is we come on here and just burst into tears. It's either laugh or cry, and we're having to kind of find the humour in this. But all joking aside, this is farcical now. There was a story that broke, shortly after I think we recorded last week, where it seemed like the board had leaked another one of their wee stories to Keith Jackson this time, and really it looked like they'd briefed Keith Jackson on the idea that Neil Lennon was going to be staying, well, in spite of the fans, basically to get it up the fans who had all turned up to protest last week. Well, that was widely dismissed. It's just wacko jacko Keith making stuff up again, right? Fair enough, that could have been true. But what are we left with now? What are the reasons that Neil Lennon is still in that job? Because there are none. If you're willing to eliminate the idea that the board are keeping him on to spite the fans, what else is there? There is absolutely no reason whatsoever to believe that this manager is going to turn anything around. It is absolute nonsense. The idea, what we said last week was that if you were relegation threatened and you were on this run, you'd be in serious danger of losing your job in any other league, in any other serious club out there. We described them last week as the biggest small club or the smallest big club in the world. That's how they continue to behave into the current week. The ugly irony that Celtic Park has become a fortress on the outside when we cannot pick up a win on the inside of it. It is farcical now. The club is being humiliated from absolute top to bottom.
You make a really good point, Stephen. I was thinking again, what did the board intend to do by so publicly and strongly backing Neil Lennon? Like, what was the aim there? And I don't know if they're maybe trying like a hard reboot of the squad. You know, the squad are maybe at the point where they were on a dialer thinking, right, couple more weeks, this guy will be gone. And maybe that was the board's message, not just to the fans, but to the players to say, Neil Lennon's going absolutely nowhere, so you better get your arse in gear. Maybe that's what he was going for.
Just one last thing on Kashinya. Now, we ridiculed him, absolutely ridiculed him. That was a terrible Rangers team. But I think Celtic have played 25 games this season. Kashinya in his time at Rangers played 26, and he's already got a better win ratio than Lennon. So going to Thursday night up against a decent Lille team, we'll get beat because they're a decent team. Neil Lennon will have lost more games than Pedro Kashinya in his time this season. Where do we go with that? We laughed this guy out of Scotland. They get absolutely slaughtered in the press by everybody. Yet Neil Lennon is still sitting in a job right now. Why is that? It's down to nothing.
It's not down to nothing though. And you've made a good point there. It's Celtic are a PLC. There's a board. There's, an HR department. Celtic are a workplace like anywhere else. And, Peter Law has to answer to Dermot Desmond, and Neil Lennon has to answer to Peter Law and Dermot Desmond. And Neil Lennon will have targets for this season, and he will have things that he will have to do with the squad. Like everyone's got a job, everyone's got performance indicators that they need to tick. So I would love to know what Neil Lennon's are, because it's obviously not getting to the Champions League. Well, we don't know. So if you were being reasonable to the board, you can say to the board, okay, just let us know what are the manager's milestones, what's he supposed to hit, because it's obviously not qualify for the Champions League. It's obviously not get out of the Europa League group stage. It's obviously not be top of the league come January. It's obviously not spend the club's money wisely, because the signings and the money that's been spent hasn't worked. It's certainly not integrate the youth players into the squad, because we've not seen any of that.
It's not to win a treble, because we're already out of one.
It's not winning the treble. So
it's obviously not avoid being statistically one of the worst teams ever in the Europa League. It's obviously not that. We didn't even aim higher than that by the looks of it.
So if you're being charitable to the board, you would sit them down and say, what is it? If you're telling us that there's reason and logic behind your decisions, which there has to be, surely. You're not just doing this out of the goodness of your heart. If there's reason and logic behind you, what is it? Because at this stage, there is no reasonable answer for keeping Neil Lennon in the job. And we've spoken about this for the last couple of weeks in the podcast about how, this is the end of someone's livelihood and employment we're talking about. And we're talking about a guy, Neil Lennon, who has been at the club for, almost exactly 20 years. But this is what happens with inaction. Stephen, you've been saying it for weeks. This is what happens with inaction. People get angrier and the opinions get stronger, and the club don't move on it, and the team don't win on it, and it's just getting worse and worse and worse.
It is getting worse, and the PR from the club, just when you think it couldn't possibly get any more amateurish or inflammatory, has been, again, horrendous this week. Absolutely horrendous. Every statement that comes out just adds more fuel to the fire. I can't think for a single second now that there is anyone. Well, there will still be people out there who think Neil Lennon's the man for the job, and the board can do no wrong because treble, 9 in a row and all that kind of thing, right? Absolutely fine. There will still be pockets of that out there, but what they are doing now, I think we can all agree, is ignoring to their own peril, ignoring the vast majority of the Celtic support. And I'm not speaking for anyone here, I'm just observing what's going on here. There's a kind of weird trope out there where if you give an opinion, you're told, whether it's us or whether it's the North Curve or whatever, or you don't speak for me. No one's saying that. No one ever says that I am speaking for the general Celtic support. I wouldn't dream of it. Wouldn't dare try and speak for the Celtic support. I'm observing, and I reckon it is the vast majority think this is over. This is absolutely over, and we are just dying a death of 1,000 cuts now. And I don't know, having survived that now, and I woke up today thinking, surely this is it. having woken up today, I just don't know what it's going to take to implement change. I can't even imagine now. To have survived Ross County even is staggering to me. Never mind to go on to lose to Ross. Sorry, just to finish off what I'm saying, that to have lost to Ross County last week and then go a full week with no wins, to lose, albeit to AC Milan, fair enough, right? They're a good team, but to have drawn at home to St Johnstone, to have conceded a goal against St Johnstone when that team previously hadn't done so for more than 3 years. The last time St Johnstone scored against Celtic, to have drawn there and to have been pretty lucky to come away with a point, basically, is unfathomably disastrous to me, and I cannot believe, I am dumbfounded that we are sitting here in the same scenario as we were last Monday.
My whole life supporting Celtic, you've always had that when Celtic go into Europe, you thought, look, we might be able to sneak it. I have never been so confident that Celtic would get beat as I was on Thursday night. I just thought there's no hope. Even if we score, they just need to show up and they will beat us because they're a competent team. But going into Sunday, it was the first time in my life I ever predicted Celtic to draw a league game at home to St Johnstone. That is unbelievable. I looked at that team, I looked at the manager, again, picking a team, and there's no inspiration in there whatsoever. Barely a change made. A team that shipped 4 goals during the week, he made 1 change, and we put out the same team. And I predicted 1 each, and I don't like doing that, but it was so obvious to see because I just couldn't see us winning the game. It's at home against St Johnstone. Stephen just said they barely ever scored against us, and now we're struggling to beat any team. We've got this run of league games coming up where it's home games or it's against bottom of the league teams, and the first hurdle we come up against, we fall right over it.
I want to know what I'm starting to wonder what the end looks like for Neil Lennon, because at the moment him seeing the league out is unthinkable. Other than the fact that there then becomes an admission that we're not going to win the league, and he's just given it to see it out anyway. So they do what they did with
final nonsense as well, where he gets the cup final so he can get his treble. It's
but that's only when is that, Melly? Like less than 2 weeks away.
Couple of weeks, yeah.
Yeah, so. The board can't go from he has our 100% back into sacked in 2 weeks. That makes them look stupid. So
if he hasn't won a game in that point, then
what happens is then I think is they're going to do the old either mutually consented or Neil Lennon's is going to be posted like he's stepping down from the role, because I don't think the board would embarrass themselves by going, we're back to this guy, because they're meant to have more knowledge than us. They're meant to see and know things that we don't. But we're on the outside and they're on the inside, but we're on the outside going, this isn't working, guys. And they're going, trust us, it's working. So I think, the end for Neil, it's madness, but the end for Neil Lennon is going to look like he's going to resign, or he's going to do the old mutually consented, or at the very least, they'll do what they did with Ronnie Dyla and say he's leaving at the end of the season because it's obvious by this point that the league is over. And it is mad. And I'm different for you too. I think the league's done. I know I'm usually ridiculously positive and a bit foolish with these things. I don't see it. I just do not see any way that this team are going to miraculously turn it around. I was thinking that, maybe one way you turn it around is by giving the fringe players a shot, because I thought Turnbull was decent when he came on the other day. Very positive. He was. I was looking into the stats. Probably man of the match. Completed most percentage of his passes. Won most of his duels. Was very effective in the final third. One of the problems that Celtic have got in midfield, well, all over the pitch, but particularly in midfield for me, from defence to midfield, is we don't move the ball fast enough. There's not enough running off the ball. Far too slow. Far too pedestrian. I'm not even going to read too much into Neil Lennon's comments from that game, because it's the same comments he's been saying literally for months now.
You drive yourself insane.
The fitness one was my favourite.
Fury.
The fitness was a doozy. To be fair to Neil Lennon, I think the point he was making of fitness was specifically towards a Yeti who was carrying an injury, maybe, and I'm trying to be as fair as I possibly can. But, do you think, Stephen, that there's maybe a call for digging out the Lee Griffiths, the David Turnbulls, not Greg Taylor, because I still think Laxalt's a much better player, maybe looking at Anthony Ralston and seeing if these guys that are... I know, Melly, you're shaking your head, but
what a list.
It's desperate times.
As well.
If Neil Lennon is looking for a spark, if he's looking for a bit of swagger, could he not turn to players with a point to prove to get it? Because these guys that are in just now, they must have it far too easy because nothing he's saying is working. Stan Petrov, Stephen made a great point. He goes, Neil Lennon changes the personnel, he changes the system, but what he doesn't ever change is the reaction from the team. So maybe he needs to look at some of these fringe players and try and is there anyone in the sidelines you think, right, he needs to start starting games now? Klamala, there's another one.
There's a guy who won't be invited back to Celtic TV, by the way, Stan Petrov. After
I enjoyed him as well. I thought he was quite good.
He was anything other than unflinchingly positive, which is what they demand from Celtic TV. So he won't be getting invited back. That's him blacklisted. The fringe players, any of who you've just listed, no, absolutely not. Griffiths, Ralston, Turnbull, 100%. I would play Turnbull, absolutely, for sure. I would play Turnbull because it can't possibly get worse than seeing Scott Brown waddle around being a facsimile of Scott Brown from 2 or 3 years ago, the ghost of titles past that is Scott Brown just now. So nothing would be worse than that because that is becoming uncomfortable as well. We're watching just Scott Brown and Neil Lennon evaporate in front of us and it is uncomfortable viewing. He's far from the only culprit, but this playing Scott Brown week in, week out is, again, just a complete nonsense at this point. He is providing absolutely nothing. Turnbull, definitely, it won't be the same type of player, of course, but we do not need a guy who is just playing passes, swaggering forward 5 yards and then just wandering around pretending to be a hard man. And I know that sounds really disrespectful to Scott Brown, but I'm fed up of what I'm watching. What I'm saying just now does not erase the previous 13 years of tremendous service from Scott Brown. I'm talking about the here and now. What we're seeing isn't good enough. The rest, though, Griffiths, forget it. Can't be bothered with the Lee Griffiths discussion because the guy isn't fit enough. And we're talking about December. And of all the things that have completely let us down this season, his fitness is one of the first indicators of how this season was going to go. When he turned up from pre-season, grossly overweight from reports and wasn't even fit enough to travel for the pre-season friendlies. I'm not turning to him as my hero, to be perfectly honest. He will come on and score goals like he always does, but he scored a lot of goals for Celtic, 120 odd probably at this stage, but over the last 5 years it's probably about 40. He's probably averaging 9 or 10 goals a season for the last, since the Ronnie Dyler days. The idea that he's going to magically turn into another, like how he was back then, I think is completely beyond him. Still useful, but no. Ralston, has it gotten to that stage where we're reaching towards our third choice right back as to be the saviour of the season?
Get him in.
Yeah, Melly's all for it. It is thin on the ground because we've got all the quote best players in the squad in the team just now and they're all woefully misfiring to a man, absolutely every single one of them. Callum McGregor tried his heart out, it looked like, against St Johnstone, but he's not got the quality in him to carry the team on his own. Christie was energetic, but it looked as if he was once again trying to get himself sent off. He's kind of edging towards the loose cannon, as we saw against the AC Milan as well, where he granted Çalhanoğlu a penalty.
Basically.
I'm talking about the free kick, obviously, but for a guy of that quality, for one of the best set-piece strikers in Europe, that is effectively a penalty we've given him there.
Just on that, Stephen, whilst you mentioned it, because I don't want to double back onto that free kick, right, in Christie. That's another thing where I think the players need... We had this conversation last week in the podcast about how the players need to be culpable. That free kick there, 100%, they would have been told, do not try your fucking best not to give free kicks away in this area. Try your best, do whatever you need to do. And then there's Ryan Christie, and there was no need to foul the guy there. And Ryan Christie comes charging in for the back, right in the area that's the most dangerous, right in front of the referee. And you're thinking to yourself, what is going on with this? What is going on with these players? What is going on in their heat? And that's why I think, Melly, as I'm positing this as an idea, I'm not 100% behind it myself, but maybe it's time to look at some of these fringe players and say, look, Ryan Christie, your heat's gone. You need some time out the team. Turnbull, you're going to be playing in the number 10 spot from now on, for example.
Yeah, look, I want to see Turnbull in the team, but this is the problem, isn't it? Players are going out and making rash decisions because they're hearing the same voice when they go in at half-time. They're seeing it before the game, they're hearing it after. Neil Lennon has come out and slaughtered these players week after week, and now he's trying to be supportive of them after their confidence is gone. And every single game where we let this go on, confidence is getting sapped from these players. So the only thing I'm clinging on to right now is if Celtic, looking at that Celtic team, I could pick an 11 right now of available players that I think is a very good team that should beat every team in the SPFL. Once we get this Lille game out the way, the European disaster is over, we just need to concentrate on the league. I could pick a team that I think, look at that team, get Scott Brown out it and put these 11 players in, maybe get Forrest, Mikey Johnson back for some width, and we've got a good squad there. But the longer we leave this, the worse it's going to get, because Jamie's talking about the players being culpable, and they are. But the problem is, these guys are going out making rash decisions. How many good players have we seen make rash decisions? Cal McGregor's trying to put out fires everywhere. Christie's flying into challenges. Ayer's pointing everywhere, trying to direct everybody. Nobody's playing their own game because they're trying to help out with everything else, because the structure of the team is absolutely disastrous. Get somebody new in. Get fresh ideas in, get these players' confidence back, and tell them exactly what they've got to do, and we could go on a run. It might not be enough now. It might not be enough because we've left it so late, but we could salvage something from this season. But the longer we leave this going, the same things are going to happen, because we've seen against Milan, we've seen against St Johnstone, it's the same mistakes, the same goals we're conceding. And looking at the starting 11, we can come on to that after about St Johnstone, but we're not creating anything either.
I was watching Sports Scene, I was listening to Sean Maloney, and he was picking apart Celtic's problems, and he was, and they seemed, as he was describing them, as a guy that understands football and is coaching at, let's be honest, the highest level, but has coached for Celtic as well. He was picking the problems out very simply. He's like, look, Celtic are getting bodies in the defensive areas, but they're not dealing with the situations well enough, and it sounds like basically they're not. And Michael Stewart, another guy who's played football professionally and obviously does a lot of watching the game, says, the only way you can change that is being coached, running through these drills in the park week after week after week after week. Neil Lennon said in his post-match interview that, all these goals get analysed to death and blah, blah, blah. I'm really not up for listening to any more of Neil Lennon's excuses about why we're losing goals. Sean Maloney also went on to say, Celtic are not getting overloads in the wide areas. They're not getting guys putting in crosses and creating from the wide areas. So they're very, very narrow, and that's not working either. So these problems seem really, really fundamental to Celtic. And this is, again, something that people have been talking about. There's been guys on Twitter talking about the fundamental problems with Celtic. There's been analysis of the games on Sports all season talking about the fundamental issues that Celtic have got. And Sean Maloney was the first person, actually, funnily enough, Sean Maloney was the first guy on our Patreon. So when we launched the Patreon, I think about 2 years ago, we went and interviewed Sean Maloney at Lennoxtown, and he gave us an hour of his time, and it was an absolutely great podcast, and it's still there if you want to check it out. The drill by now, patreon.com/20minutetims. You can go listen to that, Sean Maloney, and he goes into depth about how he coaches the youngsters and the philosophy and all that. But one of the things he said, Melly, at the very beginning of the podcast was, we were talking about the difference between the youth team and the first team at that time. And was Brendan Rodgers the manager at that time? Yeah. Can you remember? Yeah. Mm-hmm. And he was saying, well, we don't play exactly the same way as the first team. We don't play the same formation because we don't have the players. And he laughed and he went, because basically that's what formation is, isn't it? You pick the formation based on the players you've got. You don't pick your formation first and try and make it work with the players. And I thought to myself, that's what Neil Lennon's doing. Neil Lennon is playing the formations that he used to play, despite not having any width, despite not having fullbacks that can create.
One striker.
One striker. He's playing these formations that don't work. So he needs to maybe go back to the drawing board, and he obviously can't do it, or he would have done it by now, and find an entirely new formation to play. Because the one he wants to play isn't working, and it sounds so basic, but it's so fundamental. You do not have the players at your disposal to play the formation you want, and you keep trying the two different formations and they don't work.
The reason that the weekend I thought we were going to seriously struggle is the same reasons we've struggled all season. We started off 3-5-2 against Ross County, against St Johnstone, and we had 6 defensive players. We had a back 3, 2 wing backs and Scott Brown in there. Ludicrous, absolutely ludicrous. Yeah. Adding to that, we don't have 2 strikers up there, which is utterly nonsense because it's Edward and Christie. Nobody's stretching the game, nobody's going beyond. And in a 3-5-2, what you need is width from your fullbacks. You need fullbacks that can whip in a ball, or you need fullbacks that can get to the byline, use their pace and cut it across. And I spoke about it with Ryan on the post-match that Between Laxalt and Frimpong, Celtic have created 3 goals this season. 3 goals from your wing-backs. Rangers, on the other hand, have created 39. That is incredible that Celtic's 2 wide players create so little. And then when you go into midfield, if you're not getting it in there, Christie and Rogic in the same positions and Edward dropping in, it's absolutely ludicrous that we're seeing the same things over and over for Lennon. That's why we need a change.
Can I just stop you there? We might as well just pack up and go home because there's some breaking news. We might as well just pack up.
Seen it.
We might as well just pack up the microphones and go home. The Celtic board have released a statement, and the headline of the statement is: the board of Celtic Football Club wishes to make it clear it's continuing its support for Neil Lennon and his backroom team.
Fuck's sake.
Now, this is a live read to you guys on this podcast. In light of the ongoing...
Sorry to derail you there. I actually got excited there. I actually got excited.
Sorry. This is the opposite of what you wanted,
heart was going there.
This is the opposite of what you wanted.
Pounding. Jesus Christ.
So here it is. In light of the ongoing speculation regarding the position of our football manager, Neil Lennon, the board of Celtic Football Club wishes to make it clear its continuing support for Neil and his background team. Okay, so the board recognises and understands the importance of winning the league championship this season, and that, as Neil himself has made clear, recent performances have been disappointing. The board is committed to delivering success for Celtic and its supporters. The board, I've not read the whole statement yet, but I would love now in this statement for them to go on and explain how they intend to do that.
Yeah.
Anyway, let's see
unless there's a war chest in January, which I don't trust either of them to spend.
No, well, we can get...
When we're 30 points behind.
Yeah, we'll talk about the merits of that in a minute, but let me finish the statement. The board has carefully considered our current circumstances and the challenge we are faced, not least the pressure on the management and the players to deliver the 10th championship in a row that is so important to us all. Equally important is to continue to operate according to our club's values. The board has come to the conclusion that our collective objective is best served by continuing to support Neil and his team as they seek solutions for those challenges. Okay, so I'm sure at the end of this, I'm sure somewhere they will say, here's what we're going to do. Here's how we intend to do things forward. Because right now, this is shut up, we're back in the manager. But let me continue. Neil has the support of the players and the staff at the club. He understands the pressure and the environment. As his outstanding record as a manager, captain and player demonstrates, he knows what it takes to be successful at Celtic, and he's delivered success with many of the current squad of players who understand his method and approach. Okay, so they're pulling at the heartstrings there. Whilst it has been suggested that it is time for a change, at this stage in the season, the board believes that Neil and his management team are best placed to turn this team's performances around and lead us on to success. The board continues to work closely with Neil and his team to support them as they seek to do so and the progress will be reviewed in the new year. So he's getting to the end of the calendar year, effectively, then they're going to review it. I suppose that...
You've missed it. P.S. He knows the city.
Well, I've still not reached the end. But let's take this bit by bit then. There's a milestone there, Stephen, isn't there? That's a milestone. The board have said he's backed until at least the new year now. Either that's a legitimate milestone they've put there to say to supporters, we'll review it in the new year and things aren't getting better, or that's them just basically trying to shut people up for a couple of weeks.
Jamie, you said earlier that the board are supposed to know more than us. As fans, they're supposed to have better knowledge than us. Maybe what they do know is that there's nobody else. There's absolutely nobody else for this role, and this is why they're sticking with it, because that is the biggest pile of steaming garbage, just insulting pish.
Don't get too excited, there's 2 paragraphs left.
Oh, right, okay. I mean, I'm speechless at that. Absolutely speechless. There is no reason to continue this. Even if you take Neil Lennon, forget that ridiculous statement we've just endured there. Even if you take Neil Lennon, his words in his interviews, right, and I don't want to focus too much on it, but ultimately it's all we've got to go on. It's all we've got to go on is the manager's words. He comes out there and he talks about how he doesn't know what's wrong with him. He doesn't know what's wrong with him. Maybe it's confidence. There's no movement. There's no guile. There's no this. There's no that. Everyone's unfit. They're unprofessional. Right. But I'm definitely the man to turn it around. I don't know what any of it is. I don't know what any of the problems are, but I'm going to solve those problems. I feel like I'm taking crazy pills listening to this pish now. And again, it's a word we've used several times now, but gaslighting. That's exactly.
It's not
what
gaslighting
we're
anymore.
getting.
It's gone beyond gaslighting because gaslighting has a subtlety to it. and without getting
Yeah,
and
right.
without being distasteful. It was gaslighting, but there's a subtlety and a nuance to gaslighting that just doesn't exist with the Celtic board anymore. We're basically being told, shut up, sit down, eat your dinner. The board wishes to take this opportunity to thank all Celtic supporters, which is terrific, for the support during this challenging year. The response of the support to the challenges that we have all faced has been magnificent. We shut up. It is therefore important to make clear that the board has never, as it has been inaccurately reported, referred to any Celtic supporter as, quote, entitled. The board recognises this range of views expressed by our supporters and the strength of those opinions. Whilst there may not always be agreement, there is certainly a common goal, the success of Celtic Football Club, and we will continue to work together to seek to achieve that success. So basically what they're saying there is, Neil Lennon's the man for the job. We've got our eyes on the ground. We've spoken to the players. Everyone is bought into Neil Lennon. There is a united front in Celtic Football Club between the players, the staff, and the manager, and the board to make this a success, and we really think we can do it. Please stick with us, and we'll review it in the new year. Let me do something that might go down as unpopular, but I'm going to do it anyway. Is there a difference, Stephen, in a management team that has, quote, lost the dressing room and is broken and fractured to the point where the players and the managers are just simply aren't on the same page, and the players are waiting for the guy to get the sack, a la Ronnie Dyler, compared to a joint crisis where everyone is in the same boat, everyone is working together, and there's a unity behind the scenes trying to fix it? Is there a difference in those two scenarios?
Have you heard of a certain boat called the Titanic, Jamie? Everyone on that
is that
was...
the one Kate Winslet got poked on?
Yes. Among other things, that is the
I've seen
basic
the film.
synopsis.
See the film, The Titanic, right? Now that you bring it up, so that starts right with an old lady going to find a necklace, right? That's all they want. They just want the necklace, and she ends up telling them her whole life story and how she got her first shag. And by the end of the movie, they find the necklace, and you think that whole time on that boat they must have been, fucking hell, just tell us where the necklace is, you little bastard.
She had it the whole time, but she didn't show them it.
She had it the whole time.
Yeah,
they went out on that boat to find the necklace that was under the water, and she pulls it out of her pocket.
She drops it in the ocean at the end, doesn't even show them it.
I've never noticed
staggering.
that before. The whole movie. Sorry to derail this, but
It's built on a lie.
Let me clarify this. That whole film is about going to find a necklace in the water, and she's got it in her pocket, and then she throws it in the water.
Aye, because she goes out at the end and she has it, and she holds it above the ocean and pretends to drop it and just drops it in. I'll never let go, Jack. This is like Peter Lawwell, isn't it? I'll never let go, Neil.
That's honestly that is more interesting to me than Celtic. Anyway, Stephen, carry on.
That was pretty good, guys. Why I bring up Titanic is that the two scenarios you've put in front of me there, right? Ultimately, it doesn't matter, because even if there were people in the boardroom or in the bridge or whatever it is, right, where all the captain and all the engineers and all that hang about, I don't know. Can you tell I don't know much about ships or sailing, right? They're all in there arguing about it. Who's got the best ideas on how to go forward? What they do is they come to the agreement that they're going to stick with the current captain, and it's going to sink anyway. It doesn't matter if they're arguing within each other. It doesn't matter. This ship is going down, and I'm furious at that statement.
I think, Melly, I can tell you, I'm looking at my phone here. The WhatsApps are going mental. Everyone's texting with this statement. Melly, there is... Football, more than anything else, is an acutely results-driven business, right?
Yeah.
So the board can put out as many statements as they want. They can say whatever they want. They're not winning football games. They can say, we're all united in this. Good. You're not winning football games. We don't want to create too much change at this point in the season because we think the manager can turn it around. Don't care. You're not winning football games. And really, that's what it comes down to. The board, the time for talking is gone. The board can put out as many statements as they want. They can apologise to us and make it clear we're not entitled and thank us for blah, 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 blah. Don't care. Win football matches. And that's what it comes down to.
No, it's just too late. We asked for change weeks ago. Now, months ago. We asked for change months ago, and they've ignored it. And now it is looking like it's too late, because every time they've come out with a statement, Celtic go out and lose the next game. Neil Lennon, again at the weekend, we go in at half-time, 0-0. Do we get a reaction in the second half? No, we don't. Do we get a reaction when we go a goal down? We get a snidey goal. We've got about 10 minutes to win the game, and we don't go out and do it. Every time they come out with this nonsense, nothing happens after it. We get the same result. It's either a draw or a loss. And we're just going back round in circles here saying, why are you the only ones that can't see a change needs to be made? You can look at it and blame the board here completely and go, it's been years of recruitment. It's been coming. This has been coming for Celtic. But the fact of the matter is, Neil Lennon has a squad there that is better than the rest of the league, and no matter if he didn't sign one of those players, if he didn't want any of them, they are all higher paid and better than the teams he's coming up against, and he's simply not winning games. That's his job, to manage the team to win games, and he's not doing it. So why is it just going to change all of a sudden?
These chickens that have come home to roost for Celtic, or look as if they're coming home to roost, have been on their way. Not just this season. This isn't a problem that was created in August or September or when the results went bad. This has been a problem that has been widely spoken about with Celtic for years now. You know, we've discussed it on this podcast. It's been written about in blogs. It's been reported in the press. It's been spoken about by the club. You know, that the structure of Celtic is a structure that is almost maybe a decade or so old, that you've got the chief executive with his hand on the tiller and he appoints the managers, and it's all very much like his chiefdom or fiefdom, and he looks after it, you know. Whereas if Celtic were structured and had done the homework and the groundwork in the years prior to this, and they had a proper football structure and a proper operating football department, the recruitment would be a lot better and a lot more coherent, and changing the manager, or actually who would be the head coach, wouldn't really be an issue, because there would be targets identified. There would be a director of football who knows the sort of guy that would come in. Neil Lennon would come out and another guy would slot right in, and things would continue. And
Neil Lennon wouldn't have been appointed if that was the case, because he doesn't fit in with
you're right. Neil Lennon wouldn't be appointed, but you know, the point I'm making is, a failing manager in this position, whether it's Neil Lennon or anybody you want to talk about, had the homework been done a couple of years ago, Celtic would be in a much better position to deal with this crisis. But the position we're at now is the board are basically releasing a statement going, we're going to review things in the new year. Well, you know, look how quickly things have turned in the past. You know, they're going to review it in the new year. What's that, 8 weeks? Between then and now, a lot can change, and we could be out.
What are you talking about, son?
3
weeks?
Well, it's 8 weeks until the end of January, so I'm being charitable to the board there. If they say they're going to review it in January, you know, give them to the end of January. I assume they've not released a statement here to say Neil Lennon's getting another 3 weeks in the job. When they say it, they'll look at it in the new year. I'm assuming they'll look at it into the new year.
So late.
And that's the point. That's the point I'm making. The more I talk about it, the more I'm getting pissed off. We could feasibly be out of all competitions by the time that they make this decision.
Comfortably. Yeah. Jamie, see what you're talking about this goes back to another conversation we've had weeks ago, right? I feel like we're just doing a sort of greatest hits of the last 2 months on this podcast, and we keep going back to things we've already spoken about. But we spoke about Neil Lennon's baffling comments about changing the culture at the club, right? We spoke about that and how that's not easy. That doesn't happen overnight, and it starts from the top down. So if you're going to change the culture, you get rid of 1, Lowell, 2, Neil Lennon, 3, probably Scott Brown, right? Those are the 3 most influential people at the club when it comes to the culture of the club. But that's not my point just now. My point is that it's difficult to do those things. It doesn't happen overnight, but Celtic have had a 10-year head start on everyone else to do it. They've had a 10-year head start with no Rangers in the league, right? 8 years, give or take, right? You know what I mean? Rangers were failing for a long time before they finally went out of business. 10 years of a head start, and they've done nothing. And you know why? It's because this board have got no interest in doing that. They've got no interest in doing that whatsoever, because they've already got their pet guy in the role. They've got their pet manager there who is not going to rock the boat, who knows fine well how lucky he is to be in the job, and he's never going to get another one. The board know that. He knows that. He doesn't make demands of the board because he's not in a position to. He has no stock left in management. He doesn't make any demands of them. They are not going to subject themselves to another Brendan Rodgers as long as they're in the positions, because with a real manager comes power and sway, and you have to cede some of your influence to a powerful manager at the club. They're not willing to do that because they've got their guy in already. And what we're seeing is that they are so keen to hold on to that, they are willing to forgo, they're willing to sacrifice everything so that they keep their guy in the position, which is completely and utterly unforgivable. If anyone needed further proof that this board are treating us with utter contempt, it is that statement right there. I mean, Jamie, sorry to drag you back into it. I'm going to force you to read it again, but
Go for it.
What was the bit in there that implied that Neil Lennon knows what it takes? It wasn't worded like that, but it was effectively that.
That was the bit where you nearly spontaneously combusted when you heard that.
So
you nearly punched your mic.
That section of this goes, Neil has the support of the players and the staff at the club, right? I think that's the key. To be honest, I think that's this is where this all hinges. Neil has the support of the players and the staff. Is that enough though? Well, evidently not. On its own, it's evidently not. But it goes on to say, he understands the pressure and the environment. As his outstanding record as manager, captain and player demonstrates, he knows what it takes to be successful at Celtic, and he's delivered success with many of the current squad of players who understand his method and approach. See, to be honest, right, the only part of this statement that I'm at all interested in is this bit here. He's delivered success with the current squad of players who understand his method and approach, right? That makes sense. What that's telling me is the players he's not lost the dressing room, right? That's basically what that line tells me. It's still not enough because they're not winning football matches, but I would question that line, his outstanding record as manager. Has Neil Lennon really got an outstanding record as Celtic manager?
No,
Does he really have an outstanding record as Celtic manager?
No, in terms of just trophies won, then it's a good record, but with that comes talk about context, and it's not just about tallying up trophies, because if you do that, then Kenny Miller is a better player than Alan Shearer. You know what I mean? So it's simply not the case. Nacho Novo's better than Francesco Totti. But right, see this idea, right, and it really triggers me. See this stuff that he knows what it takes. No, he doesn't. I'd argue that it's the opposite. He doesn't know what it takes. Just because he's done it before doesn't mean it's working going forward, because what he has proven time and again this season is that they can't win games. What winning a league takes is just, there's no magic to it. There's no like hidden algorithm that we shit munchers, the fans, don't understand. It's only managers, it's only football people who understand it. It's just winning games. You just need to win a load of games and you'll be successful. Neil Lennon is not doing that. That's the complete opposite of what they've said there. The idea that because you've won trophies before means you're going to do it again is complete nonsense as well. Do you want me to give you a list of current managers who know what it takes to win a league, who aren't current champions? Pep Guardiola's one. Antonio Conte's another one. They've all won trophies before. They've all won championships before, rather, but aren't current champions. So what about that, having won last season, means they're going to do it this season? That statement has made mention of the fact that this, the 10 is the most important thing and all that. That is just based on nothing, based on absolute nothing. Just
do you know
history,
what it is, though?
Again, suffocated by history.
It's another case of being paralysed by the 10. And this definitely smacks to me of is a board ill-prepared for adversity, paralysed by the 10. They're absolutely paralysed by this. And I understand it, because if Celtic don't win the league this year, this failure of all the involved will be one of the biggest failures of Celtic in my lifetime. And that's not entitled. People might listen to that and go, I can't believe you're saying that. Over the past 9 years, we've accumulated an advantage. That's how it should work. Yeah. It should be your advantage doesn't disappear at the end of every season. You start afresh. That's not the way it works here. The way it works is these advantages grow exponentially. So by the time you hit the 10th title, by the time you're 9 years deep, with all the money that you've had in the bank, with all the experience of winning titles, with the level of club that you should be now operating at, having almost a free run at it for 9 years, your 10th title should be shooting in. And the level of failure that we'll experience here, if they don't win it, is massive. It's on par with absolutely anything that any club has failed at. So that I think they're just ill prepared for change, and that's what's happened. And you touched on it. You said there's no one else they don't know who to get, and that's it. They've no idea. They've no idea who to get. They've no idea who could come in and rescue this season. And if they've looked at it, they've got no faith in all the names that have cropped up, because no manager's going to come and say, "Oh, I'll rescue that league for you." No manager would. Why would a manager do that now? Why would any manager put his name to that? They wouldn't. No. Absolutely not.
It's late for that, and it's just the whole board thing as well. If say, I'll just put a name, Eddie Howe, an up and coming manager, would come in and say, and Peter Lawwell interviews him, Eddie Howe will have more questions for Peter Law than Peter Law will have for Eddie Howe. He'll be like, what's the structure of the club? What happens here? Who runs all this? And Peter Law's like, oh, that's me. I do all that. He's like, whoa, it's 2020, mate. It's nearly 2021 in a couple of weeks. That doesn't happen anymore. Celtic are going into this, and I said it to Stephen, you weren't on the podcast, Jamie, but it was just after the transfer window, and I thought, it's the end of the road for this team. It just feels like, even though we've signed 6 players, at the end of this season, how many of them are going to go? Is Neil Lennon going to be there no matter what happens? Is Peter Law going to be there what happens? And I said at the time, very rarely in football do you get to ride off into the sunset, because it's all about preparing for the next season and being preparing for everything that's coming in the future. And as you've just said, Jamie, Celtic aren't prepared for anything. They never prepared that this would go wrong and what they would do if they needed a plan B. Plan B was to make plan A work. And this is what they're trying to do now. They've found out that they're in an absolute mess and they've no way to get out it apart from just stick with what they've got right now.
I'd love to know what the plan is. I hope it's not just, keep doing it, will click eventually. I'd love to know what the plan is.
Sevco will go into liquidation and they'll go
that's
to
imagine
Dubai
it.
and come back. That's
imagine it's so that there needs to be change. If they want to turn this around, there needs to be change, whether that's bringing in more coaches, better coaches, sports psychologists, getting a new assistant manager in, or whatever. What I want to see over the next couple of weeks is change. If the board think they can do this, we need to see something change, because if you just want to keep doing the same thing with the same guys, it's not going to turn around.
No, and it could. The thing is, it could, right? We have to say all this in the acknowledgement that everything could be fine. We could just roll to the title. It all starts here. We've had the galvanising effect of somehow losing a load of games is going to breed confidence into the team. We're going to surge to the 10, right? That could happen. But right now, why everyone is so angry is because it's based in nothing. It's based on nothing and other than blind keep the faith birthday card pish. That's all we've got to go on here. It is based in nothing whatsoever. There's no evidence for that as well. In fact, it's getting worse. It's getting worse by the week. And that is why people are angry and why they're not swallowing this stuff anymore. One final thing on that statement as well before, I could do this all night. But one final thing, perfectly normal. All major European clubs do this. All major European clubs come out and publicly state that they didn't call the fans names. They come out and said, somebody told you we said you're entitled. I don't know where you heard that from, mate. Don't know where you heard, but we didn't say that. It's as if they've been grassed in. I wasn't talking about you, mate. No chance.
I don't know where this entitled part came from, to be honest. I never thought. I don't think I've ever heard the board. It's journalists that call Celtic fans that, but I've never heard anyone accuse the board of calling us that. And on that, we shall wrap up this episode. That was the first time we some breaking news live as the podcast was being recorded. Stephen,
angriest I've ever been on a podcast. So hopefully that's the last. Hopefully it's all sunshine and roses from now on. But thanks for tolerating me, folks.
Well, Melly, Peter Law says, calm down, we're going to win the league. They're all working together to do it. The combined brain power of the Celtic board, Celtic players and Celtic management team are going to deliver this league for us, Melly. So any final words?
I wish you'd slipped in that shower, man. Thanks for listening.
And on that, thanks for listening.